Again, we're looking at how to help executive functioning. We're talking about boundary setting, keeping them firm, but with some flexibility and consistent as possible. All carers, and that they're realistic and achievable. Routines and structure and consistency, again, because we all prefer predictability. We know where we stand then. Children learn by repetition. If the equilibrium is thrown by a late night or getting late to school, it will throw them out completely. Make sure that you get their attention using eye contact, use their name, be clear, simple, step-by-step instructions. Learns what triggers the behavior, then you can avoid or at least anticipate. Help with organization, charts, reminders.
Anything that you can get written down.
I was going to say,
my
yeah.
front door has a list before my eldest goes out the door of exactly what needs to be in the school bag. So he has a visual checklist before he leaves the house every single morning, and it really helps, because otherwise what you find is they're distracted doing other things, and then they're out the door and he gets forgotten and everything else. So
it's like, by the door, get the bag out. Yeah, you've got that, you've got that. Color-coded papers, notes in the bedroom, and things like brush your teeth on the mirror in the bathroom, have a drink by the fridge in the kitchen. All of these things, reminding, shoes go here, arrow, so that they remember. And the more you do that, the better it is. I have, with my ADHD, a really, really good ability to backtrack of where I've been, what I've done, to find things, because I'm always losing my phone, my keys, and all of these sorts of things. My daughter doesn't have the same ability, probably because I did it all for her. So again, it's letting them learn by their mistakes.
So causes of ADHD. This is a big thing, and I think as a parent with a child with ADHD, there is an element when you find out that your child is having difficulties or has a diagnosis, there is an immediate guilt. Is this my fault? Is it something I did? It's absolutely not. People with ADHD are born with it. It's not something that you've caused while you were a baby. It's not anything to do with your actions. Very kind of early development, still within the womb. We do look at red flags around early pregnancy, so prematurity, needing oxygen at birth. But also one of the other major red flags with ADHD is family history. If people in the family have got ADHD, the likelihood is that you're going to have somebody else within the family who has ADHD. And if they don't have it diagnosed, they have it undiagnosed. So it's trying to remove the blame. Nobody is to blame. It's a neurotransmitter functioning issue. And me and Sally were actually just talking about this, in that there was a really good thing that was shared on social media recently. And I know that it helped one of my family members really kind of get a grip on what ADHD was. And it was just an analogy that was talking about differences between phones. So everybody has a phone these days. You have an iPhone, you have a Samsung, you have an Android, but an Android and a Samsung won't work with iPhone, and you have to get a different app to work with them. So there's nothing wrong with the phone, you just have to work with it in a different way. So you have to use a different app with a Samsung that you would with an iPhone. And it's the very, very same thing with ADHD and a lot of other neuro diversities, in that there is no wrong, right, there's no blame, you just work with it in a different way. So ADHD is basically an imbalance of two neurotransmitters in the brain, and that is it in its simplest form. They both play a really important role in the ability to focus and pay attention to task. Another thing to think about when you talk about this, and sometimes we use this with younger children, is to almost think about Chinese whispers. So you have your neurotransmitters in the brain and they transfer information, and you have a message that starts here. And then as it transfers along, you either doesn't transfer along properly, or it gets quieter, and then actually the message at the end isn't how that message started. And that's all it is in the brain. It is the neurotransmitter functioning, and there is no blame to play with it. Treatment. So yeah,
Go, Jenny, you do treatment.
So treatment for ADHD. Basically, the first line of treatment is strategies. We would always avoid using medication with young people and adults, really, if strategies are going to help. So first and foremost, even before a young person is diagnosed, if they're presenting with hyperactivity, with inattention, with impulsivity, there is nothing to stop you using ADHD strategies to help manage that presentation. But sometimes, unfortunately, strategies are not enough, and young people and adults need additional treatment, which is where we start to talk about medication and the role that medication can play, particularly in the educational side of things with children. When they're in a classroom, it can be very stimulating. Children are expecting to concentrate on the teacher, but they've got 30 other children in the class who are all doing something at the same time, which can be very, very distracting. And the medication that we use works predominantly on concentration. So in the classroom setting, medication can be really helpful to ensure that young people can remain concentrated on what the teacher's talking about or what the teacher's asking them to do. So it can really help to reduce that distractibility. It can help them be able to focus a lot better. You then see that young people are able to finish tasks, whereas previously they would be struggling, and they might be becoming anxious about the fact that they're aware they can't always finish tasks. But medication sometimes can be really, really important in helping a young person through education so that they are able to do the things that the rest of their peers can do. And they can get through their exams, they can get through all the work and the coursework they're expected to do. The medication, again, only forms part of the treatment, and the strategies and the scaffolding around that young person still have to be in place. Healthy diet can also enhance a child's concentration, as can good sleep. Sleep's really, really important. If you don't have good sleep, even somebody without ADHD will present as quite hyperactive, inattentive, and impulsive if they haven't had enough sleep. So that's really, really important, particularly for young people who have ADHD, is that we do our very best to try and get them as much sleep as they need. School age and young people with ADHD, there is also sort of other training courses that parents can access. So for young people in primary school, in Stockport, we have the parenting team, and they do the Incredible Years by Caroline Webster Stratton, which is fantastic. It's phenomenal for young people who do and don't have ADHD, but it's a really well used form of intervention for parents to support them in the home environment. And it talks very much about kind of the sorts of things that Sally was saying that help with the executive functioning. It's about praise. It's about making sure that the young person gets a lot of positive feedback and not just negative, because when you struggle to do things that other people do kind of day in, day out, it's very easy for young people to get hung up on the negatives, because for them, that's all they hear. Oh, don't do it like that. You're not supposed to do that. You haven't done that. You've forgotten to do that. All that forms a really negative impression for a young person and can really affect self-esteem and anxiety. So things like the Incredible Years is really, really helpful for parents, particularly to just flip that frame of mind from a negative to a positive. And sometimes that just that change is all that young person needs, and you'll see a massive change in the home environment just by making small changes. So that's something that's offered in Stockport. It is only offered to primary school children, and that's something that professionals can refer over to the parenting team for. Alternatively, you can buy the book, and there are other parenting courses out there, but I know myself and Sally both know the Incredible Years really well, and that's fantastic.
Okay, so when we think about the benefits of medication, some of which Jenny's already touched on, is cognitively, it improves their attention and their short-term memory, increases the amount of accuracy they manage with schoolwork. Because they're concentrating better, it seems to reduce the activity level, so they're less fidgety. Because they can focus a little bit longer, their handwriting improves. It decreases their chattiness and noisiness and disruptiveness. And by doing all of that, it improves their cooperation, can reduce how quickly they get cross. It improves that parent-child relationship and reduces non-compliance, not getting on with teachers, getting on better with their siblings, all of those things. So the medication comes in stimulant and non-stimulant. When we talk about stimulants, we talk primarily about methylphenidate, first of all, which is in stopwatch. Our main uses are with Equisim XL, Concerta XL, Mataride XL, and Zagatin XL. So Equisim is a 8-hour preparation, the others are 12 hours. All have a slightly different initiation and duration. They all work while they're in the child's system. They can cause a slight increase to blood pressure and pulse and reduce appetite. And we monitor this very, very carefully throughout the clinic. Dexamphetamine is the other sort of stimulant we use, and we use a new drug called Elvance. And the side effects from this, again, can increase blood pressure and pulse and reduce appetite. And again, we monitor these very, very carefully.
We also have a lot of conversations as well with parents, because it can be really daunting to think about putting your child on medication, particularly a stimulant medication. And the most common side effect is the loss of appetite. But we do have lots of conversations with families of how this can be managed. So making sure that they have a good breakfast, making sure that they have a good tea and a good supper. So those calories that they may have missed while their medication has been on board during the day can be made up in the evening. And it might be that young people would prefer to snack on little things through the day rather than having a big lunch at lunchtime.
But all of this is covered in the clinic review appointments. The other medication, the non-stimulant medication, very simply is one called atomoxetine or Strattera. And this has most common side effects are nausea, reduced appetite, and again, increase in heart rate and blood pressure. We have lots of advice around taking that. And another one called guanfacine. And again, we give lots and lots of advice about taking that and monitoring whilst you're coming to clinic. Here are our top tips. So first of all, understanding and acceptance of the condition, including the potential use of medication. To develop a series of rules and routines and rituals and refer to taking responsibility and checking those out regularly. To be adaptable and support where things are not going quite as well. Sometimes you need to support some things going on in school. Sometimes you need to support things going on at home. Break down all your tasks into smaller little chunks and keep them little steps and realistic. And be prepared in advance for changes in schedule and how that will impact.
So developing workstations for alternative learning provision and timeout options for inappropriate behaviours. This is in school and outside of school. And I know lots of schools do give brain breaks, they'll give movement breaks, and kids can have like a timeout card. And at home, same thing. You know, if you're having an argument, just walk away from it, have that time to calm down and make sure that you're not reacting, because all you're going to get is this. Promoting positive reinforcement when possible and choose your battles. Again, walk away, come back to it. Be calm, assertive, consistent with behavioural expectations and ignore low-level activity. So again, that's almost like that pick your battles thing. So you need to be consistent. You need to have very clear, consistent boundaries, and everybody in the household kind of needs to live by them, and parents need to work really closely together to make sure that you're both really consistent with those boundaries. once you have the same boundaries in place, again, it goes back similar to that routine thing, in that a young person knows then and is expectant of what is going to happen if they behave in a certain way. So making sure that that is consistent is really important for a young person, because they know what the expectations are then. That low level behaviour, ignore it. You know, young people with ADHD are really impulsive, and they're going to say stuff and they're going to do things. And if you choose to react to everything that a young person does or says from an impulsive sort of point of view, you're going to be there all day. So sometimes it's just a case of hand up. You don't need to talk, don't need to engage. If you're in a conversation and they're trying to interrupt, just hand up. 1 minute. You don't, you know, that's it. You don't need to get into a conversation about it. Structure, again, non-structured times if necessary, but routine is better. And develop regular communication systems within the schools, and make sure that, you know, that you're having those conversations with school, that you're involved in the meetings. And if you feel like something is not going right at school, then ring them. Schools really, really like to have parents and young people's perspectives and input into the care for young people. So it's really important that you try and keep those lines of communication open. And I understand that that's not always easy, but I think if you and school are both working towards you know, the young person's best interests, there'll be a meet in the middle option there somewhere.
So again, we've got the top tips. We've already talked about the incredible years parenting. You have to be referred by professionals. Schools can do it as well. We have a parent support group and education sessions that we were running on the third Thursday in the month. We're hoping we'll get those up and ready again. And we collect email addresses of parents, and we'll come back to you asking for those when we can get up and running with those. In schools, we often refer to the behaviour support service and to the jigsaw teams, and they are often able to offer some in-school advice and support. We have an organisation called PIPS. PAPS.
But there's also Space.
And
well.
Space Group. Our greatest love is these ADHD websites. ADHD Foundation, brilliant information, fantastic conferences if you can get to those. There's also attitudemag.com, and of course the Stockport local offer page. Any new things that we do and develop, this is how hopefully you found this video, will go on that website. So please keep your eyes open, keep looking.
The ADHD Foundation website, just to add, actually has downloadable resources on it. They have some really wonderful booklets, ones for young children explaining ADHD, a teenage one that's called Thriving with ADHD. There's one for parents, there's one for teachers and school strategies. And we used to give them out. Unfortunately, obviously, recently, we haven't had the access to be able to do that. But you can get those as a downloadable resource on the ADHD Foundation webpage, and they really are a fantastic resource for young people and parents.
That's all we've got for now. We'll hopefully put some more videos up with some more training on. Hope this has been helpful. Thanks very much. Bye.